Hello, I am Danny Gregory, and this is Draw With Me. Draw With Me is an occasional, but ideally weekly event in which we get together and draw. It's not a drawing lesson, it's not a drawing tutorial, it's not a drawing demonstration even, really. It's more a demonstration of the importance of just drawing whenever you can. It's also an excuse to stop whatever you're doing for half an hour and just do some drawing. And it's also a reminder that you should do some drawing. Maybe you haven't done it in a while, and this is an opportunity for you to do that. It is also hopefully fun, not too serious, not too grimly serious. Drawing is, after all, something that we should love doing. It's not an opportunity for self-abuse, as it were. So don't beat yourself up. If you do a lousy drawing, we'll forget about it in half an hour and never speak of it again. Certainly, those of you who are regular viewers of this series know how badly things can go awry sometimes. So it seems like a bunch of people are here, which is great, and I'm looking forward to drawing with you. Now, it has been winter here. Not surprising. It is, after all. Well, actually, December 21st is when it's really becomes winter, right? Officially, and that's 2 days away. I woke up this morning and it was 18 degrees. And that's just unreasonable. This is New York, and actually, you never know what the weather's going to be like at this time of year. It can be very nice sometimes. It can be very warm. We had this very strange snow event a couple of days ago. It was yesterday. Suddenly, all of our phones started buzzing and beeping with emergency alerts, and there was this incredible, 1 hour intense snow event that came barreling into the New York area, and just, wow, it was just incredible. So while all this was going on, I was making a little film. And this little film that I was making was about the issue that I've had in trying to come up with ideas for Draw With Me, frankly. This is incredibly difficult, week after week. Coming up with something that I can draw here with you, that you can draw, that I can draw, sitting at a table. It's not that hard, but it was certainly an opportunity to make a film out of. And so let me share this film with you about my search for something for us to do today. Hands. I have two of them. Hopefully you have at least one to draw with. But today we're also going to use our other one as a model. If you are left-handed, draw your right hand. And if you're right-handed, draw your left hand. At some point in the not too distant future, we'll actually reverse that, and we'll try drawing with our non-dominant hand. But for today, let's go with dominance. So another thing about this particular assignment is, what do we... Well, it's something I brought up last week, where I said, let's start drawing from prompts. So rather than big kind of theoretical exercises, let's just draw from prompts. And some of you may remember many, many years ago, we had a group that was called the Everyday Matters group. It was on Yahoo back in the days when Yahoo was a thing. I think it still is a thing, but actually I got an email just last week saying that they are closing the groups. So this group we started in 2003. And one of the members of the group was a great painter named Karen Winters. And Karen started to make a list of drawing prompts. And she would post one, I think, every week. And there ended up being several hundred of them. And people would draw them, and I would draw them, and we would just all draw the same thing. And it was just really nice. And so the thought was, let's go back to that process. So I sat down and brainstormed a list of, well, to begin with, 101 prompts. And Kosha really liked the idea too, and she is working on a really sort of beautiful way to present these prompts to you. So it's going to take her, I think by next week we should have them. But I can tell you that the very first one is draw your hand, so you're not missing anything yet. So we'll do that. But when we have this list of prompts, I will randomly select a number each week, and I'll tell you what that number is, and you'll be able to look at that list of prompts and go, aha, okay, this week he's going to draw bologna sandwiches. I better get one made before noon on Thursday so that I can draw the bologna sandwich. Or possibly the prompt will be draw schnauzer, in which case you'll have to go out and acquire one and bring him into your house and make sure that he's sitting available to be drawn. So there'll be all these different prompts, and you also, of course, can draw them on your own without me. Draw without me in your own time. But I think it'll be, I don't know. For me, prompts are they're good because they help you to overcome this issue that I had in the film, but which I think we've all faced, which is, well, I've drawn that 1,000 times. What I need something new. So you might look at a prompt and go, oh, actually, you know what? That makes me think of some other thing, and so you could come up with your own version of a prompt. But I think another nice thing about it is we'll all be drawing the same thing, so we can share that and go, oh, let's compare our drawings of hands. So, all right, without further ado, I've wasted 8 minutes of your time. I will say hello, by the way, to some of you later on if you'd like. And if you have any particular comments, questions, complaints, forms of outrage, let me know, and I will address them in time. Right now, I'm concerned about this, right? Can you see this? What appears to be a dotted line bisecting my skull. Let me take care of that. All right. Good. I was worried that that was sort of like a laser beam that was going to cut my head in half. Okay. Let's get on with it. So, a lot of times I show you what I'm drawing. Today I'm not going to, because draw your own. Do not draw my hand. You can draw my hand if you want. But what I think we'll do is, like, let's maybe draw it a few times. I'm going to do basically a contour drawing. I have a bunch of different pens here. Let me switch to my split camera here. So yeah, so I have a bunch of pens here. I have this, my Lamy Safari, which I'm a big fan of. Lamy Safari, it's a fountain pen, and it's got a fairly thick nib. I've got this Pigma Micron 005 that I showed you last week. I have this, which is a fairly new pen to me. It's called the Pentel Stylo. And check it out. It's got sort of a flexible nib. It's kind of like it's a sort of piece of devilishly amazing Japanese innovation They love making these kind of flexible nib brush pens. And then I have this one, which is my, I can never remember the name of it, the Kawaii Sport. It's a little fountain pen that goes into itself, and then you put it around like that, and then you have a fountain pen. Let's start with him. And let's draw. You can draw with whatever you want, of course, but I'm going to draw with this guy. And let's just start. I'm going to go slowly, and I may be uncharacteristically quiet during stretches of this drawing, just because I'm trying to put every ounce of concentration in getting this right, so I don't humiliate myself in front of you by drawing something that looks more like a foot, or possibly another species. Can be tricky drawing your hand, because if the paper gets away from you, you don't have a hand to put it down with. But you know, it's also good, I think, when you're doing this sort of thing, to look at the negative space. Which is to say, look at the table underneath your hand. Make sure you are drawing that as much as you're drawing your actual hand. Don't worry about if you get it wrong. You can always draw another line. Don't get sketchy on me, though. Just if you feel like you made a mistake, correct it. It's sort of like a second chance. Would that life were more like that, right? That we had endless second chances. And no penalty, really, but for, I don't know, just leaving the evidence of our mistake there for people to see. I've talked to you about my grandfather, I believe, at various points. My grandfather, who would have been 110 this year. 110 a couple weeks ago, in fact. And my grandfather had hands that I am now discovering appearing on the ends of my arms, too. I have somehow inherited these hands from him. Now, he was a doctor. Doctors tend to have nice hands, so that's good. But it's sometimes a bit disconcerting, because I remember his hands quite well. I'm not quite sure why, but I do. Thumbs can be difficult to draw. They're different from your other fingers, and they can end up looking stubby or crude in some way. All right, I'm not going to belabor this hand. I'm going to try another one. Maybe a different pose. Yeah. Maybe a different pen. Let's try a different pen. Maybe I'll draw it very small. Because I've managed to get that. I told you about my my small, tiny sketchbook. I showed it to you actually last week. Well, I've sort of shaken that urge. I managed to fill up that sketchbook. Didn't have very many pages, so that wasn't a huge accomplishment, but I did fill it in. And then I also felt like, it's time to go big or go home. I was already at home, so I went big and went home and was at home. There's that expression, I know it like the back of my hand, and yet we don't really know our hands that well. I mean, we certainly look at them a lot, but I don't know how much attention we pay to them. And like, would you recognize your hands? I mean, as I said about my grandfather's hands, I recognize his hands, but would you recognize them? Have you ever noticed somebody who has the same hands as you? Like your manual doppelganger, as it were? Somebody who is walking around with your hands? I wonder what would cause that. But yeah, your hands, they're really, I mean, people have difficulty drawing hands, and I understand why, because they are pretty complicated little machines, right? I mean, I think there are more joints in your hands, or maybe in your feet. Although feet are relatively easy to draw once you get the proportions right. But your hands have a lot of joints in them, and they're just, when you look at them for a while, they're weird. They are weird things. They're wrinkly. In some cases, they're hairy. You got those nails on them. There's all kinds of foreshortening issues with them. Okay, so Mike asked me what I mean by don't get sketchy. Here's what I mean by don't get sketchy. I mean, I'll draw my hand in a sketchy way. Here's sketchy. Like, that's sketchy. So I'm kind of like, oh, getting sketchy, I'm not really committing. I'm just sort of approximating. And so I'm not really stopping to look. I'm drawing this kind of shaggy-handed thing. That's what happens when you aren't really stopping to pay attention. You're just moving your pen around, and you're kind of stammering as you draw. So that's what I mean by sketchy, Mike. I hope that's helpful. I'm not sure if you have a different term for it, or if you hadn't really noticed it before, but yeah, that's sketchy. Not really ideal. I'm going to try drawing something small, drawing a hand that's, I'm going to put my hand further away from me. That's also helpful to see it from a distance, and it makes it a bit smaller. And this time I'm drawing it with a fatter pen. This Lamy Safari has a pretty fat nib. Yeah, sketchy, I don't know. I don't really like the word sketch. Sort of ironic coming from a person who works at sketchbook school, but there's something about sketchy, right? I mean, a sketchy character. That's what we call people who are not trustworthy. Maybe that's the origin of it, right? A sketchy person isn't really clear, isn't really credible, and maybe a sketch is less credible. I don't know. Maybe I just don't like the word. So, all right, I'm going to try and draw something. Draw it from the top. And There is a whole other approach to drawing hands, which is much more structural. You've probably seen this where people will really draw the kind of mechanical structure of the hand, really. Drawing it in terms of sticks and where the joints are and that kind of a thing. It's drawing it as if it was a machine almost. I mean, here's an interesting thing also to notice when you're drawing a hand is that it's interesting, the relationship between the length of your fingers and this part, the back of your hand, the meaty part of it. That part of your hand is actually surprisingly long. It's almost the length of your fingers. And that can really throw off your proportions. And then there's, of course, the issue of the thickness of your fingers. Again, another easy place to get tripped up. I'm going to try combining these two pens in this one drawing, just because they have different line qualities. Your line line quality is a lot of the kind of almost the accent of your drawing. It's like that's the thing that gives it personality sometimes. And a lot of times it's what defines your style when you draw, because your line quality, it's your signature, really. And so you could have two people draw the identical object and actually draw the identical contours, right? Draw the same lines to represent what they're seeing. But if their personalities are different and their handwriting is different, those two drawings will be really different. And that's what's interesting about it, right? That's what gives it its expressiveness, and the fact that it's you is that line quality. So, I feel like I know my lines pretty well, so I could see a drawing that I did, and even if I say, wow, I don't have any memory of doing that, I would know it in a crowd. I would know that was my drawing. I don't know that I would know that this is my hand, because it's starting to look more and more like, I don't know, like an amphibious hand. Yes, amphibious. Bringing out my inner salamander. So, let me flip it around. Draw this one. I'm still quite attracted to this fine line, I have to say. It is quite the way I feel these days. Sometimes you feel big and bold, and sometimes you feel kind of, not smaller necessarily, but more detail-oriented, right? And so your line is, you just are more drawn, as it were, to kind of a narrower pen, a finer pen. You want to get into details, and you want to make smaller drawings rather than big, bold ones. And other times you want to just be, kind of broader and bigger and bolder and all those kinds of things. And so you pick up a big fat marker or a brush pen even, and you kind of start knocking things out there. I don't know if I'm a big believer in palm reading. Some of you may disagree with me, but I am sure, of course, that my hands represent the life that I've led. Just if for no other reason than they have scars and marks on them that come from living life, the life that I've lived, and my hands end up having, showing the wear and tear of that stuff. So, like this hand, I have several scars on it that I actually have several scars that came from the day that my son Jack was born. If you'll indulge me, I'll tell you the story while we're drawing hands. Let me just put my model in a new pose here. A little tiny one. Move it a far off way. Okay, so so my son, who's now a giant and lives in Los Angeles, the day that he was born was in August. And yes, my one son, and I've briefly forgotten when he was born. But the day that he was born was a really long day, really long. And my wife was in labor for like 200 years. I'm sure they seemed even longer to her than they did to me. But she, at one point, he was born. So he was born at about 6 or so in the morning, 6:30. And then it was sort of, we had been at the hospital for, 30 hours or something like that. And he was, he was off in the nursing unit or whatever it's called. And Patty was passed out from exhaustion. And so I was, had to go off and make phone calls and tell people that the baby had been born and stuff. And I decided that I would go home and I would, take a shower and kind of just clean up and make those phone calls. And so I went home. But as I said, I was really deliriously tired too. And so I took a shower, and while I was in the shower, we had a glass bottle of mouthwash, I think it was, that was sitting on the back of the toilet tank. The toilet tank was right alongside the shower, and I was washing my foot, so standing on one foot, washing the other, and suddenly I lost my balance. And I fell, and as I did, I reached out and I sort of yanked down half the shower curtain, and I also managed to knock this bottle into the tub and fell on it. So there's shattered glass all over the tub, and I landed on it hands down. So of course I think I may have bashed my head. No, but the main thing that happened to me was I had all this broken glass wedged in my hands. I mean, and you know what it's like when you cut yourself, particularly your hands or your head, they bleed like crazy. And I was in a warm shower, which of course made it even worse. So I got up and, and again, I was like really exhausted and kind of out of my mind. So there was this blood geysering all over the room. Sorry, this is getting kind of macabre. And all I could think to do was to go back to the hospital. I figured like maybe I need stitches or something. So I wrapped my hands up in like toilet paper or something, and I went back to the hospital, and to the very hospital that I had just left, the very hospital I had just spent a ridiculous amount of time in. And I went to the emergency room and I told them what had happened. And eventually my sister, who was there because the baby was being born, found me in the emergency room. And she said, "What are you doing here? Like, we're all upstairs, blah, blah, blah." And I said, yeah, I'm getting stitches. And I did. I had quite a lot of stitches in my hands. And it was fine. It wasn't nothing dangerous or anything, but it was a bloody mess and kind of shocking. So yeah, so these scars that I have, and you can barely see, there's one there. I don't know if you can even see it. They're pretty minor, but there's some in my palm. I can see them. There's one there. Anyway, so those stitches I can date because they are exactly the same age as Jack. 25-year-old scars. Yep. So I've drawn maps of all my scars. I don't know if you've ever done that, but just charting all the ones all around my body. Pretty minor ones, most of them. I haven't been in a war or any massive accidents, but your scars are part of those are the lines that life draws on you, and just kind of acknowledging them. So yeah, so there we go. So I'm going to pause and talk to you, see how you're doing. Let me just go back to this view of me. Have a cup of coffee. Actually, somebody says, Mary says, mouthwash into open wound. And that actually wasn't the case, because it wasn't minty fresh, because it was, what was it called? It was this cinnamon kind of mouthwash that's red. So it was hard to tell where the blood stopped and the mouthwash ended. Yeah, that was pretty good. Janice has posted her picture to the schoolyard. Excellent. I hope that you'll do that too. I hope you're a member of the schoolyard, and that you will share your drawing too. And that you'll maybe do, if you don't share it in the schoolyard, you share it somewhere else. You can put #drawwithme, and then we can find it and see what your hands look like. That would be nice. And going back to what I was saying before about prompts and this prompt list that we're working on. So hopefully by next time we meet, I'll be able to tell you where this prompt list can be acquired. It'll be free, of course, but I'll be able to send you to the place where it is, and you can get it. And then every week we'll refer to it. I think we're all on board with this idea that this is what Draw With Me will be, at least until we get bored with it, that we'll just have these random prompts. And ideally, there'll be prompts that we can do kind of sitting at the computer, sitting at a desk. So prompts like draw a foreign country. Well, we could probably do that. Or draw a live elephant, prompt 74. We probably won't be dealing with. But I will select ones that are appropriate for desk usage, and maybe what I'll do is I'll say next week we're going to do prompt number 17. So next week we will in fact do prompt number 17, but you don't know what prompt number 17 is yet because you don't have the list. But by next week you'll know how to get it, and if for some reason you haven't, I will tell you what it is probably during the actual session. So you'll have a week to think about it, to wonder what it is, and possibly to say, to hell with it. I'm going to find something else to draw, and that's fine too. If in doubt, draw your hands. Take off your shoe. Draw your foot. Draw your shoe. Draw your sock. There's a lot of things attached to your body you can draw each week. And the thing is, drawing your hands is, there's so many interesting aspects to it, right? I mean, there's so many things that by studying your hands, you will develop a lot of the skills that are required for drawing most things. Measurements, negative space, proportions, shading. It's all there. It's all there. And your hand is a complicated thing, as I said, which makes it more interesting. Drawing a cube, drawing a cone, drawing a sphere, less so. But your hand, which is made of so many different shapes, has a lot of interesting things in it to draw. So yes, And also, you know, I think having this habit is good, right? I mean, I've been drawing on the iPad for quite a long time now, and quite a lot. So it's good for me to get back to the fountain pen, to having, you know, can you see ink stains on my hands again? Don't get that with the iPad. I miss them. Yes. So Janet says, quite correctly, come on, Janet, here we go. Sorry. Janet says, a slight shift of angle and you've got a new subject. Exactly. So you can constantly change it. You could also change the lighting on it, you know, so you could have more contrast. You could see the way that the lighting works on it, so you could work on your cross hatching. You know, there's a lot of things in there. So Mitzi has a question for me. When you do contour drawings like this, do you ever deal with the shadows as contours? Sometimes. I mean, I did do a few little cross hatchings, and I did do some shadows that go underneath it. But you can, as you say, treat the shadow like a contour, and you can just draw the outline of the shadow that sits underneath the hand. Hopefully, you know what I mean by a contour drawing. A contour is, I think it's French for. I was going to say silhouette, but silhouette is French for silhouette. Now, contour is French for outline. And that's what a contour drawing is, essentially. You're drawing the outline. So you could draw literally the outline of your hand. You could trace it. But then there's also the outline of a wrinkle, the outline of a nail, the outline of a shadow. You know, those are all outlines. And essentially what you're doing with contour drawing is you're not getting too deeply into the concerns about shading and so forth. You're just looking at the shapes. It's about shapes, and not about line, and not about tone and so forth. Good. What else do we have that you would like to talk about? Mitzi says, my proportions are off but not bad. I'm glad we aren't doing time drawings this week. It's true. In the past, I've said, all right, we have 2 minutes to draw this, and it's kind of an adrenaline rush, which is interesting, but, you know, let's relax. It's Thursday, or as my trainer calls it, Mini Friday. It's Mini Friday. You know, and another thing about proportions that's interesting when it comes to your hands is you don't really know what the proportions of your hands are until you really study them. So judging your own drawing can be difficult, particularly if you're doing a foreshortened position, where you really will be surprised at the proportions, at the relationships between the shapes, because they're not what you think they are. Again, the way that we think our hands are is different. Maybe that's something we should have begun with, which is to draw what we think our hands look like without looking at them. You know, and then you would see, there are interesting things I don't know, like what is the length of your various fingers relative to each other? And how far apart do they get? And what is the relationship, the length of your thumb to your other fingers? It's surprising, my thumb is almost the same length as my index finger. But, you know, here's the thing I've discovered. And this might be the thing that I am known for after I die. Which is a discovery I made when I was quite young. I haven't published it yet, but I think it's a very important one, which is the hairs on your knuckles. I have hair on every one of my knuckles. You may not have hairy hands, but you probably have the pores. I mean, the, whatever they're called, you know, like the little dots where your roots of your hair come out. The only place that you don't have them is your index finger middle joint. I've looked at a lot of hands, and it seems to be a universal rule that for some reason we don't have hair on this finger joint. We do on the others, but not here. I don't know why. I don't know if it's for nose picking hygiene, if it makes it better for pointing. I don't know, but for some reason. So that's an observation. That's my big discovery. That's what I learned from years of drawing. So yes. Let's see what Fat Hobbit has to say. In a school exam, I had to draw my hand. They said my drawing was too expressive. My hands looked like gorilla hands, but I was really pleased with the result. Talk about curbing your enthusiasm. Now, the fact that your name is Fat Hobbit suggests that perhaps you do have gorilla hands or gorilla feet. Hobbits do have big, hairy feet. So anyway, but how can you make your hands too expressive? Who's the most expressive hand-making artist? I think it's Egon Schiele, right? Egon Schiele, he always would have people like with these weird hands in the frame, long, long fingers with all the joints. Beautiful. I used to study him, and, I should go back to that because he had a way of making fingers like really bony between the joints, really long and expressive. They were beautiful. So, Fat Hobbit, I will avenge you and support your right to draw expressive hands. You should. What does Sally Lynn say? She says, when I draw hands gripping something rather than relaxed, they look like they're gripping something rather than relaxed, is what I mean to say. Okay, well, so in other words, when you're drawing them and they're supposed to look relaxed, well, I mean, it's more interesting if they're gripping, right? Because if they're just sort of lying there like dead fish, why bother? But if they're gripping something or if they're, pouncing or expressing themselves in some way, all the better, I say. Janet says, Ben Shahn. Yes, Ben Shahn. Again, because Ben Shahn was so great at basically contour drawing, right? I think he drew with a dip pen a lot of the times. His lines were really kind of, they were very variable. He would have splotchy lines that were really expressive, beautiful. If you don't know Ben Shahn's work, Google him. He is a really fantastic artist. Yes. All right. So this has been fun. Think about prompt number 17. We'll tackle it next week. I actually have no idea what prompt number 17 is, and I may make it up. So, but whatever it is, we'll have fun drawing it. You bring your sketchbook, you bring your pen, and, block out a little bit of time to do this. And if you're not watching this live right now, all the better. Do it whenever you want to. Come back and watch this again. Draw some hands another time. This is certainly not something that you have to completely schedule, although I think it is kind of good to say, I'm going to draw for half an hour on Thursdays at lunchtime. And, but if you need to do it on Fridays at bedtime, that's fine too. Just try to do it on a regular basis and, try to fill up your sketchbook with lots of drawings, good and bad. The more you do, the better you'll feel about it. I think the better you'll get at drawing too. I think the better you'll feel that your drawings reflect what it is you're looking at. But certainly the more confident your line will become. Your line will be stronger, bolder, if you want it to be. But it will express your feelings more succinctly and more accurately. It will also hopefully express what you're seeing and capture those things. The more we work out, the better, the more our bodies get into better shape. The neuromuscular chain that goes from your eyeballs to your brain, down your arm to your hand, the more you exercise this, the better it gets. You probably have fairly strong neural connections already just from your thumbs on your phone, but this also engages your index finger and some other parts of you. But the main thing is that what you're seeing gets transferred into what you're drawing, and the more you do it, the stronger it becomes. And you'll find if you don't do it for a while, that when you get back to it, it suddenly doesn't look that good. You're really rusty. But the good news is you will get it back way faster than it took you to develop it in the first place. These instincts and these connections are perhaps a little dormant, perhaps a little flabby, but that's better than when they don't exist at all. So if you haven't drawn for a while, maybe you haven't drawn for 30 years, it's okay. You will get back in the flow faster than if you'd never done it at all. But the main thing is carry this around with you, because if you carry it with you, then, and you always have a hand and you always have a pen, instead of checking Facebook, instead of looking at Reddit, you can draw your hand and draw it from hundreds of angles. You could fill an entire sketchbook with drawings of your hand, and I think you'd be better at drawing schnauzers and elephants and anything else that you want to draw, because you will have worked out a lot of drawing problems in the process, and those drawing problems become the basis for your knowledge of how to draw anything. You know, there's no one way to draw any given thing. You know, I think that some of us are under that illusion. If you look at other drawing tutorials on YouTube, how to draw an eye, and they'll say draw an oval and then draw a circle and then draw this, draw that, draw the other, as if it was, you know, a recipe for, you know, corned beef hash. The fact is that drawing is about looking at something intently, breaking it down into shapes, lines, angles, distances, and recording them. It's not a bed from IKEA that you can build in the exact same way every time. You know, it comes down to, it's like language, you know. I mean, we all have these big vocabularies that we've developed over years of talking, but when it comes to expressing ourselves, those words are just there, right? So there isn't a particular way to say things. No, we make it up. We express ourselves with using these tools that we have polished and cultivated over the years. So that's what drawing is as well. And the more you do it, the more fluid it becomes, but also the more you it is. The more you're using the vocabulary that is your particular visual vocabulary, your particular line quality, your particular way of showing what you see and how you put it down on paper. That's what's so magical about it. That's what's so cool. And that's why it's also a lifelong education. You know, you never really stop learning this stuff. You know, you keep encountering new things. And if you didn't, it would get dull. You know, if you have a way of doing it, eventually you'll get bored by that. But if you open yourself up to drawing endless things, drawing them in endless ways with endless kinds of pens, you'll keep being interested and keep doing it and keep having fun at it. So anyway, that is my sermon for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time here on Draw With Me. Generally, ideally, it will be on YouTube at noon Eastern Standard Time live. Next week is the 26th, Boxing Day, day after Christmas. But I'll be here. I will be here, possibly wearing some new sweater or something. Possibly, maybe I'll get a new pen for Christmas and I can show you that. But I also have some books that I want to share with you, and I keep meaning to share them with you. I got another one yesterday that is insanely gorgeous. So I might spend a little bit of time, if you'll indulge me, flipping through some new books on drawing, books about sketchbooks that I think are really cool, that will inspire you. And if you want to, you can draw while I'm doing it. So, you know, don't feel like it'll be a waste of time. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for drawing with me. See you next time.